As a time in one's life, childhood is often paired with closeness to the rest of the animal world. And like many other things that become lost as we grow up influenced by social expectations about adulthood, so does this affinity. For some of us, loving animals is sometimes considered childish, and talking about them as part of one's family might come with an obligatory chuckle. Just so the audience doesn't think you're that kind of person. But as I was writing this, I could say that the cat sitting on my lap was family, her purrs and her warmth calming my cramps. And as we are recording this, we need to do it in between the dog's naps, if we can manage. So, questions come to me. How is a multi-species family made? How do human and non-human companions learn to relate with one another? Does it happen as early as childhood? And if so, how does it look? What sorts of relations arise out of the daily lives of children and their pets? And I do use the word pets knowingly. Most often it is animals as pets that children come into contact with. What do the two kinds of beings learn from each other? Animals as pets and humans as children, both being vulnerable to adult humans and the society in which they live. Luckily, some of these questions have already been tackled by several researchers, so in this video, we'll focus mainly on the CLAN research project, which stands for Children-Animal Friendships, Challenging Boundaries Between Humans and Non-Humans in Contemporary Societies, coordinated by Veronica Policarpo. The research explores these questions by looking at effective practices of children and pets, by looking at how empathy and relationships develop and how they are defined, how families and households change, and how care plays a vital role. Hello, childhood, land of endless bliss and play.
Hello, kitten puppy. Were you stray? Or did you grow up in a litter, bred to stay?
Come on here, be our kin, my guardian twin. It'll be fun.
Or so some would say. We start by circling back to the word itself. What or who is a pet?
A pet is an animal who has been named, who is allowed to share the domestic space with humans, and who will never be eaten.
A pet was also named for a child, a spoiled, indulged child. But pets as companion animals seem to have appeared in the Victorian era, initially a practice of the elite who could afford such a splurge. As Western cities began to grow, animal presences in them started being policed. Upper-class sensibilities could no longer stand the smells and the cries of slaughter in the city, so gradually, most farmed animals began being pushed out. Discourses surrounding hygiene and public health, along with an increasing desire for a controlled and safe environment, also pushed animals associated with straying out of the streets into the earth or into private homes. But pets could remain in the urban space, that is, under the control of human owners and their children. Pets could have food, shelter, and even space to play. But if they transgressed their proper role, they could always be killed or abandoned. And despite many new laws, their condition is still vulnerable today. Currently, children tend to be viewed as complex beings, but sometimes they are still understood as either innocent and pure, or actually evil, in the sense of being uncivilized, uneducated. They too are pushed into a binary, hard to escape from, seen as not yet adults and often put on the other side of what is considered rational and moral. The idea that children and animals get along well emerged with the idea that children are maybe a bit like animals, sometimes wholesome, sometimes wild. It follows then that not only our ideas of non-human animals are grounded in history, but so are our ideas about children, and that actually these two meet. Both human children and companion animals, regardless of age, share common vulnerabilities. They are both given a subordinate place in relation to adult humans. They are not perceived as fully citizens or granted political power, being placed in a position of guardianship under which their agency can be easily denied. However, while human children grow out of it in time, animals as property remain, being infantilized for their entire lives. Thus arises the potential of questioning both childhood and pethood jointly by looking at how they work together and what practices emerge from these relations. It's no small thing to be able to choose a companion animal, or if you are to be more attentive to the power of words, an animal companion. The entire decision rests on human shoulders. They choose the species, the color, the temperament. According to the clan research, many aspects play a role, from the animal's cuteness and how they look, to preconceived notions associated with certain breeds, to the animal's size or possible behavioral characteristics and needs. Animals enter families from shelters, but also from breeders, from pet stores, and sometimes even as a surprise gift. Parents and children have different views of why they'd like a pet. Of course, parents focus on care and responsibility, on the opportunity that they hope animals will teach children respect for others and how to nurture. Besides, animals are seen as bringers of joy, enriching the emotional life of the family, and as a bonus, they are also able to keep children busy, consuming their excessive energy. Children, of course, see this as the immediate benefit: fun and play. One interviewed child mentioned that,
"Because animals play with us, it's almost as if they were a friend of ours."
perceiving individual animals as friends and companions is how human children start to see their subjectivity. As 12-year-old Miriam says about Ninja the cat,
"I think that mainly he needs affection. So we have to respect him, like we respect a person. I think that's what he needs to be happy."
Through closeness and affection, it sometimes happens that animals are no longer objectified. But not always. The opposite can happen too. Children that play with living beings as they would with dolls, dressing them up. The relationship is not at all innocent or straightforward. The new animal too has to learn how to adapt to the humans, and there are many rules indeed. What to chew, where to go, when to do this or that, and how to act around all these strange beings mustn't be easy to get right away. The first few weeks are some of the most important. Relationships and rules are set, and if they don't work out, the pet might be returned or rehomed. So, how are multi-species families made? And what species? This is an important question, as different species are treated very differently. Dogs and cats are most often the ones who become closest to humans, and because of this, are most likely to be seen as part of the family. Other animals, such as fish, might be treated as disposable, being quickly replaced if needed. Space is crucial in homemaking, and homemaking plays an essential role in who counts as family. In one study, dogs who were kept inside and allowed to sleep on beds were more likely to be seen as part of the family than those who lived outside. Because there are few spaces in which dogs can interact off-leash in the public domain, the home remains a central site for defining more than human family practices. Within it, rules and routines, while decided upon by adult humans, are changed and influenced by both children and pets. Dogs can be welcomed into a family and be asked to fit into its pre-existing schedules, or they can be allowed to shape them. Cohabitation, shared activities, and the length and quality of the relationship all add up to animals being considered part of the family. Sometimes, children even mention pets of other relatives, which they consider integral to their kin network, and they know quite well. Terms such as meeting, liking, and knowing come up, showing that children often see other animals as individuals they enter a relationship with. Adults, however, even if they do include pets when asked whom they consider family, tend to laugh or dismiss strong affection towards them, for fear it might be seen as, you already know it, childish. Being childish is considered something one must grow out of, and in the child-pet interaction, adults see an opportunity for children to learn respect and care for one another. In practice, however, things don't go as planned. Most families interviewed within the Clan project showed that parents do most of the day-to-day caring, and most often the women. Children do care, but in another way. For them, playing is a form of caring. They see play as a need to be fulfilled, maybe both theirs and the pet's. The sensorial aspect of care and play is essential, as interacting between human and non-human animals takes a physical, hands-on form. However, it is not just humans who care, but non-humans too. They provide emotional and sometimes physical support. One child mentions in an interview that
Sometimes I begin to make the handstand in the middle of the house, and when I fall down, they come immediately to my rescue.
And another says,
When we are alone, it's the animals that come to us, that come to help us.
In another study, dogs are shown to become part of the daily routine, for example by being eager to push the bottom drawer of the dishwasher in after the dishes are stacked. So, animals are described as actively producing and changing family dynamics. More than their parents, children recognize that the family wouldn't be the same without its non-human members. For 13-year-old Carla,
Life without Lily would be more like I wouldn't talk so much with other people. Because sometimes we're in the kitchen and she comes with her toy and then we hang around each other more.
the human-animal boundary is not so easily drawn in multi-species families, and care is an activity in which all animals participate. Let's take Pavi, for example, an auburn white-spotted dog whom the clan researchers encountered. Barbara, his human, enjoys Pavi's company even when he just lays on the bed, but she also looks out for him when he goes on the balcony to stare at humans, dogs, and birds passing by. Even though Pavi can jump, the girl still pays attention, just in case. Their relationship is embedded into daily life and its needs. For example, when Pavi is thirsty, he looks at the bidet to ask for water. Well, sometimes mistakes are made, as Barbara says.
He goes there and he looks at me. He looks at the bidet, drinks water again, comes back, looks at me. That's when I realized that I opened the hot water tap.
For her, Pavi is
the life of the house. Because when everything is silent, he's the one who wants to play. He calls us and we start playing with him. If Pavi isn't around, nothing special will happen because he's the one who moves everything around here.
Encounters such as these and the simple pleasure of just being present together add up to multi-species family life. But families change, and not just in one way. In reconstituted families, animals from previous relationships can bring conflict into new ones. Illness, unemployment, or change of house are all moments in which the status of the pet may change, and so is the birth of a human child. Anthropologist Daphna Shir-Vertesh has coined the term flexible personhood, meaning that pets are like emotional commodities.
They are loved and incorporated into human lives, but can at any moment be demoted and moved outside of the home and the family.
Drawing from David Harvey's conception of flexibility as the defining logic of late capitalism, Shir-Vertesh shows how pethood allows humans to
react adaptively and opportunistically to changing ways of life and social conditions.
Pets are seen as a way to enlarge the family and can be compared to children, as the researcher identifies 4 patterns in her research.
The animal as a pre-child, the animal as a child substitute, the animal as a semi-child, and the animal as a significantly different from a child.
These sorts of conceptualizations build a shaky ground for when actual children appear, as some couples in the research demoted the pet from being seen as their child, calling them an it or a nuisance, and other couples even rehome the animal, not being able to take care of both. While familiar relationships change between humans too, Sher Vertesh underlines that in the case of pets, their personhood status is being challenged. They are seen less and less as individual persons, and their undesirable differences, such as too much hair or barking, become salient. The rest of the people in the community tend to follow the couple's conception of the animal, and thus, no one remains to claim their best interests. Being part of the human family is related to being seen as a person. As one becomes more and more entrenched in the family history, one's individuality and personhood become inseparable from the family's understanding on who they are. The non-human animals participate in important events, from birthdays to funerals. They share joy and grief, they stand with humans as humans stand with them, they mourn the dead, and ultimately, they are mourned. Or at least some of them are. Grief is unequal. Not all lives are considered worth grieving. Just as some humans are considered less grievable, some non-human animals too are seen as less so. Without counting all those farmed for food or used otherwise, for companion animals too, there are hierarchies. Dogs and cats tend to be more highly regarded as family members than fish, birds, or reptiles, and thus more deeply mourned. Quite often the cause of death is not even determined for many of them. For example, one child mentions his heartache about his bird.
I don't know exactly what he died from. He kind of... In one day, he was okay, and on the other, he was already. I was sad and I kept asking myself, why?
Grief is political. Research shows there is a taboo against grieving deaths of non-human animals, even of pets, with whom we live closely. Hence, researchers gave it a name: disenfranchised bereavement. Grieving individual non-human animals challenges their status as material resources or replaceable members of a species, ultimately putting a dent into human exceptionalism. Following Judith Butler's 3 characteristics of grief, sociologist David Redmalm explores how pets occupy an ambiguous space when being mourned. First, being grieved means being considered irreplaceable, but that is not always true for companion animals, as humans might quickly turn to get another one. Second, grief is transformative and unpredictable, but pet owners often plan for the animal's passing, framing it as manageable and a natural part of having a pet. Third, as grief is a bodily experience, and
the loss of a person is always the loss of a body.
Mourning is felt intensely and physically. This sort of missing appears even when animals are given away without actually dying. Grief reshapes us. It changes our understanding of ourselves, our lives, and the world around us. It lives with us in bittersweet memories, shaping our future. Miriam recalls her departed golden retriever, Lori, and their closeness, even when he died more than 7 years ago, when she was very small. She remembers him dearly, mentioning a touching example of interspecies care and communication.
When I was a baby, Lori would, sometimes, when I started crying, go and get my mother.
Lori seems to have left his multi-species imprint in Miriam's human world. For her, he is irreplaceable. The memory of his body coming to her rescue persists in a timeless zone, and grieving him meant becoming someone else, a human who knows how it feels to be fully connected to another species. So grief calls our world into question. It asks for our attention. It demands our care. And so, it is a force of change. Occupying the category of an animal or a pet, and even just being called an animal as a human, is dangerous, as it puts one in the condition of disposability and vulnerability. On another level, being called childish and being infantilized puts one in a condition of not being taken seriously, being dismissed, guarded, and controlled for one's good. Thus, both categories, that of the pet and that of the child, operate in one similar way, by denying full agency and voice to the subject. And again, when one of them, the child, might eventually get out of this fraught category, the other will perpetually remain, as current social conditions keep perpetuating relationships of ownership and domination, and as long as those in need of care are seen as somehow less than. What other futures could we build then? How can affects such as love and grief guide us? What would be desirable, sustainable, and joyful for both non-humans and humans, for both children and adults? A key to how current families are made is in the making. Family is formed through different practices. It's what we do with each other, not defined solely by an institutional bond. Emotions make and unmake our relations, whether with humans or non-humans. And many contemporary families are seen as places where members can unleash their full potential as individuals, be they children or partner adults. But what does it even mean to be authentic, and what could it possibly mean for non-human animals in human families? As more questions arise, we can begin by reclaiming and redefining family as
based on mutual respect, aid, individuality, and freedom.
This respect is not for adults only, but everyone, children and non-human animals included. We can continue by valuing care and reproductive labor, by seeing it as essential and organizing around it rather than around productive work. This requires us to take a hard look at gender imbalances across families and strive for a more just organization of the household. And we can keep going, restructuring homes, schools, and public spaces. We've got a lot to do. But most importantly, let's not forget to play, too. Hello, childhood, wild land full of unknown fruit.
Hello, dear companion. Where's the loot?
We'll eat together, play together, marvel at each other, and learn how to play better.
What's that whisper? I'm listening.
I'm listening to you.